So the next session is called, is for the builders out there, blockchain security challenges, navigating the risks before building a DLT solution. The facilitator of this session is Elias. Chris is co-founder of Celia Legal, which specializes in counsel for Web3, FinTech, and emerging technology. I'll hand it over to you to introduce your team and run the session. Chris?
Awesome. Thanks, Gordon. All right. Can you hear me okay? No issues. All right. Well, let me get set up over here. Okay. Okay, great. Well, good afternoon all, and welcome to the Blockchain Security Summit. I hope you've enjoyed the previous talk so far, and I'm very confident that you'll definitely enjoy this one. So today we'll be talking about blockchain security challenges and navigating the risks before building a DLT-based solution. My name is Elias, as Gordon mentioned, from Celia Legal. We're a firm of non-lawyery lawyers focusing on Web3 and FinTech, and I'll be moderating this session. I'm joined today by very smart, intelligent guests, Bill and Angelidis, founder and MD of ASTA, a full-service technology partner focusing on IT service management, development, and emerging tech. The next panelist is Ciaran Finnegan, practice leader of CMD Solutions Australia, a firm focused on transforming and helping their clients to achieve their cloud adoption objectives. Joe Rocca, blockchain engineer at Labrys, a Web3 focused consulting firm, and Prashant Gami, founder and CEO of XEnabler, which provides software development as a service. So I know that these panelists have a lot to say and have a lot to contribute, so let's just jump right in. Okay, so I guess, I wanted to start with some recent news, and I know I spoke to some of you earlier last week about some topics, and this one's particularly interesting. So a lot has been said about the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, and a lot of the sort of conversation is focused around financial failures. But I was wondering if there is another angle to all this, and potentially, a cybersecurity or security vulnerability angle. Prashant, I'd like your take on this, because I know you have maybe a few thoughts on this.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Look, bank failures, as you know, is a very financial matter at this point. But if we look at it like, a lot of this liberalization in the bank and a lot of this, growth in the bank that came through technology world. So SVB is a classic example. The security that it is doing is a lot of startup world in California and all that. And the behind the scene, the problem is that while financial instrument is a major player here, technology is something that is lacking to give that visibility to the people and consumer and everyone, that something going on behind the scene that is not secure, high risk, and it does not make sense to people. So we talk about security that bank needs to keep against the dollar it lends, and how secure those things are. Have they bought the insurance on that and all of those things? Now, while legally they need to maintain that, it is not in place, and there is no visibility or there is no enforcement that can happen in the current world, because all that is manual. And that's where things like smart contract or blockchain or anything can make it system driven rather than people driven, and can enhance, I wouldn't say solve completely, because these are, as we all understand, these are much larger problem, and some of them are by design and not by fault. So but the technology can enhance the visibility, give that micro level visibility rather than macro level visibility, and provide enhancement on those things and create a better future for the financial, for everyone. You?
Yeah, great. And I was just wondering if anyone else on the panel had any further thoughts on that particular topic? I mean, it's relevant and at the top of mind for most people.
Yeah, I might jump in on that one. It's pretty interesting point, and I think it raises that challenge that we constantly see with technology disruption, is that these large financial entities have been behaving in a certain way for a long time. This technology is disruptive, and we're seeing them challenged to pivot the way they run their businesses to adopt that new technology. And then you see opportunities for startups, neobanks, organizations that can be much more nimble. So I think it's going to be an interesting couple of years as we see these new players challenge existing practices. But overall, the outcomes are going to be really positive. As Prashant said, we get that continuous assurance capability, whereas today we're really relying on a lot of manual processes stitched together, point-in-time assessments. And there's no real visibility. Like when you look as a consumer and try to understand, who do I trust here? Where are my funds? How are they moving and so on? It's very complex. Ultimately, we're putting our trust in regulators, in processes, in reputation, in size. An entity is too big to fail, or a government or another entity will bail them out. I think we might be moving to a point where we actually trust the technology. I don't know. I think that might take some time, and I'm sure along the way there'll be some hiccups. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting time.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? The regulators, shouldn't they be pushing this or planning for it or doing something? I mean, it seems like it's a solution to getting to the micro level and instant. What's it going to take for them to get in?
As the lawyer on this on this talk, I will say that the governments all over the world are definitely taking a look at this. What form it needs to take, I think that's going to be an interesting. I mean, that's up for discussion. It's up for debate, and to what level of, I guess, to what extent does the government get involved, and to what extent should the technology sort of step up and solve some of these problems? It's who's to say at this stage, but Bill, yes, that is definitely happening though.
Good to hear.
Okay,
It's like who's gonna take bull by its horn, right? It's a massive bull, and whoever want to take it on, obviously they're gonna end their career, and then future generation will benefit. So who's gonna take that hit?
Yeah,
I think this is a classic example of the coordination problem. So basically, you want all of these banks to come together and act a certain way, but you can't get them to follow all the same rules. And so that's what blockchain is there for. All the rules already exist. Everyone has to follow them. Otherwise, your program will not execute. And so I think that it was really interesting what Prashant said. There are problems in these institutions created by design. And that lack of visibility, the coordination problem is there so that these institutions can take advantage of the fact that no one can really grab the bull by the horns.
Exactly.
Well said.
yeah, very nice. Yeah, I think that's super interesting, and there's a lot of, I mean, just in that segment alone, there was a lot of packed information. But let's sort of break it down. But I want to take maybe a step back and leverage Ciaran's sort of experience here. And I say this respectfully, Ciaran's a bit of an old head and he's seen a lot in his time. So I always appreciate people who've seen sort of technology develop over time, and I love seeing sort of their view and insights applied to the context today. So yeah, Ciaran, if you can give us a bit of a history of the development of fintech and cybersecurity related issues, and just the general development of the internet, and yeah, what do you see then that's comparable to today?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's interesting, and yeah, it's nice to be able to look at these cycles over time and watch. Unfortunately, sometimes the same patterns emerge, but you can probably tell by my gray and lack of hair. I was sort of setting up, Swift transfer systems for banks and stuff 25 years ago, when that was the latest and greatest way of moving money around and securing them and so on. And then, watching how, I suppose, the internet and that sort of technology really changed the way a lot of those banks were operating, and changed the networks they trusted to run transactions across, all that sort of stuff. But what I think is most interesting is what happens when a new technology gets adopted. We see a lot of new players rush in. We see a lot of excitement and hype about that technology. But then typically we see a lot of immaturity around how to implement that technology securely. So if we look back, the early days of the internet, you look at some of the websites that were out there and online stores, they just couldn't get published now. There were SQL injections. There were like so many very easy to compromise vulnerabilities on those websites. And now when I look at, what's happening in the Web3 ecosystem currently, again, we're just seeing a lot of DApps. We're seeing a lot of, technology deployed it's not inherently secure. There aren't those best practices in place. There aren't very strong procedures in place to sort of secure them. And it's really hard, again, to know who to trust and what to trust. People say things like do your own research and, it's all on chain, but none of us are expert enough across these technology domains to really make informed assessments about whether something is secure or not. And yet we're trusting it with, large amounts of our savings and so on. So I think that's really interesting. I think it's sad in a way that every time there is an interruption like this, we go through a phase where people lose out, people lose their savings, very insecure services that get built and they get compromised in ways they probably shouldn't, and I see this big imbalance where on one side we have state-sponsored actors who are going after these systems, who are well-funded, very knowledgeable. And then we have small startups trying to build these systems who are, struggling to get product to market, don't have, that deep access to security domain knowledge, and it's likely it's an imbalanced playing field, So I look forward, I suppose, to the space maturing as rapidly as possible. And much as I don't like saying it, I think the existing world of financial services has something to add. There is some value there. If we look at, say, Prashant, I think you might have mentioned, some challenges at SVB, but, supply chain security. Those traditional entities, they have very strong practices in place to manage supply chain security risks. That's just not happening in the world of Web3 today, unfortunately. And, we see these fascinating side channel attacks like, NPM packages that are poisoned, BGP-based network attacks. There's so much happening that the industry is probably going to struggle to keep pace for a period of time. So yeah, that's my sort of historical lens on it. It's again, I think we're just in that point where there's a huge amount happening in a very constrained amount of time, and unfortunately,
kind of like either adding or a question to you, Ciaran, is there are a few things that I notice regards to the security problem. One is obviously people want to make money quick. The gold rush, obviously, so they want right now when the bull run is happening, and that causes a lot of this code to be deployed without any scrutiny and all that. The other one obvious is that the skill set shortage. So there are not many people out there who understand the smart contract and all that, let alone they are getting audited, because I interviewed so many people who are just graduate, coded 5-6 smart contracts that the chains are running on, and they're not audited, which is scary. Apart from the fact that best practices and all that, there's no audit happening on that as well. But what I'm seeing also is that when this new technology comes, we, as you correctly pointed, we forget the lessons we learned in the last one, and we try to relearn them again, over and over again, which is a massive problem. I don't know if that can be solved though, because sometimes we get so impressed by the shiny new toy, we forget that everything old is My question to you though is, does it need to be, and this is what I learned over time, that these technologies and these new ways of working, before they come to mainstream, they go to secondary places where the systems are not that secure anyway and not working anyway, countries where the banking is completely broken or their currency is completely broken. They need to prove that over there because the acceptance of failure is much higher there because their current systems are even worse than that. So they can adopt that, learn that, evolve the technology before they come to mainstream and first world. What do you think of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think right now Web3 is operating in a highly risk tolerant environment where consumers they do have that risk appetite that they're willing to take it on. And sometimes that's for, as you said, geopolitical reasons. Sometimes it's profit driven. But yeah, we have that luxury, I suppose, right now. But if the industry is successful, that won't be there for long. We do need to grow. We do need to mature. We need to make it a safe place for people to operate. So while I think you're right, it's kind of, we will repeat the mistakes of the past, and to a certain extent that just has to happen. We have to throw out the old and bring in something new, and as part of that we will lose some of the value that was in the old. I do hope it happens quickly, and I think the points around education, enablement, building strong frameworks, building processes, and adopting existing governance models. Like it does frighten me the lack of governance that we see in some of these entities at the moment.
Ciaran, I was around when you were around doing the Swift stuff, and I was doing other things on the side, right? So in some ways it's repeating itself, right? You've explained it really well. One of the challenges we've got now, which in a way shouldn't be a challenge because we are going to repeat the same security stuff like we did with, when we invented it for securing the internet and Web 2 and so forth, is the resources. Prashant touched on a very good point. We're training cyber people. We're training smart contract audit people. We're training smart contract audit developers. And the reality is, if you're going to build the dApps and you're going to make them secure, the tools haven't quite been invented yet. Forget the tools for mainstream adoption, right? That someone else is working on that. But in parallel and probably together, we should be working on mainstream secure adoption, not just mainstream adoption. And we're not, there's no industry body heading it up in terms of the development side, the application. And I've spoken to a number of universities, and they're all taking a different angle to it. They're all focusing on a different area, and they're not talking to each other about how to build the best of breed solutions in this space. So until we get that confidence up, how do we get the regulator to say, please go and use this technology for RegTech, so we can get better regulatory reporting and so forth. So we've still got a long way to go, and that's the exciting part, right? This is early.
I think it is coming because a lot of the changes that I have seen in the last couple of years is away from the first, the primary blockchain or the layer one blockchain to industry specific blockchain, the blockchain for carbon credit and all the sustainability versus particular blockchain for financial instrument and particular blockchain network for supply chain and all that. Identity, the soul bound token is a classic example. They are going and creating this next level of detailing to make sure that the particular problem of that particular segment is addressed natively by those tokens. So you do not have to rely on extra layer or have to implement yourself to provide that additional layer of security, which I want to really pass it on to Joe, because he's a developer. I want to see what C actually has to say in this space.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think one of the biggest challenges when you do apply blockchain technology is a lot of people want to have their application be Web3 just for the sake of it being Web3, but you really need to have a use case for it. You need to understand what you're using the blockchain for and what benefit you get from the blockchain specifically, because maybe what you're trying to do is not meant for blockchain. Maybe you need to commit some transactions off chain or read some data off chain or something like that. Back to, I forget who said it, I believe it was Bill, about the tools that are available to developers like myself for security. There really isn't a lot. There's pretty much just the auditors. There's an automatic auditor called Slither that you can use. And then other than that, it's just knowing what order all the different interactions need to happen in to make sure that everything is secure and the function reverts when it's supposed to revert, things like that. But I think the most important thing that a lot of people forget when they do develop dApps is, does it need to be a dApp?
Yeah, Joe, that's an interesting take there. I want to linger on that for a little bit. So would you say that the primary security issues are related to the incorrect use of blockchain technology potentially?
I think so. I think a lot of applications just put things on chain to put things on chain, and they don't think about security risks. And then people put their money into smart contracts that can easily be hacked or manipulated in a way that was not originally intended. So I think both the companies that are building dApps as well as the users need to all understand what is the use case for this application using blockchain.
That's a really interesting take. So as a developer, though, I'd imagine you'd have to, do a ton of reading and keep yourself up to date on this, on the development of the technology and keep up to date with best practices. From your perspective, how difficult is that? And is that a practice that is undertaken by a lot of software engineers, in this space?
I think one of the best things about blockchain is that everyone who is involved in the community genuinely enjoys being there and learning about it. And so I don't think anybody who probably joined this panel or is on this panel is going to have an issue keeping up with the technology, because that's just what you do in your free time. You read articles about it. I know at my work in particular at Labrys, they give the developers such as myself time to explore this new technology, see what we can do with it in addition to working on client projects. And so it's a really important aspect that I think is actually easy to achieve as long as you're genuinely interested in the technology in the Web3 space. If you're just looking to get rich quick, this is probably not the space for you, and you're probably going to end up losing money in the long run. You might get lucky, but you could also get lucky in Vegas.
Joe, it's very true. I've never been lucky in Vegas. Joe, you guys, we found the same thing, right? As builders, we found the same thing, that sometimes this is treated like blockchain is treated like a bit of a hammer and just looking around for nails to hit, and people come up with all sorts of crazy ideas on why they should use it. I reckon in the last 12 months, we've advised probably 40% of the projects that have come to us to not use blockchain, because there isn't a real reason to use blockchain in the way that they think they should. Have you guys found the same thing?
As a lawyer, I have.
Yeah, I think so. I know a lot of the salespeople and business end of my work, they always talk about how, I had a meeting with this client again, and they had this idea for blockchain that, again, is not a use for blockchain.
Right.
So also having people in those business roles who understand the use case for blockchain has been really helpful, so that before it even gets to me, where I have to tell them no, there are other people who are knowledgeable enough to say, actually, that's not going to work.
Fair enough.
And I can tell you, like, working between the technology and the salespeople and being a technical person, I get dragged more into the sales call explaining why they shouldn't be using blockchain. But to add to that, Chris, what is happening is not just the lack of tools and the lack of knowledge in the blockchain space, but what happens is whatever technology you do, it affects different parts of the system. Now, when I started my career, mobile apps was a big thing, and mobile apps is an applied layer. So a lot of the problem that mobile apps had didn't become large problem because the core system were still intact, versus when we look at blockchain and how it is changing the core finance or any core of the system, probably Bill and Ciaran said when it was done digital using mainframe, after that, this is probably the first time we are touching core banking. So whatever knowledge is there is with people like Bill and all that, they are no longer coding, and people like us who are coding has never seen anything like this. So there's a lot of problem in understanding those complex problems as well. And when something goes wrong at the core, it is widespread. It's absolutely like touches everyone on that network rather than particular segment of user or particular application or something that can be backed by the core system.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome to hear, Prashant. And I think, I want to turn it over to Bill. Bill, I know you've worked with small to medium sized businesses. Curious to hear your take on this, and you already mentioned that you deal with a lot of use cases that don't necessarily need blockchain technology, but from a security perspective, do you see certain behaviors where people sort of circumvent security measures to achieve a cost-effective outcome or speed to market?
Oh, look, I think the speed to market from a blockchain security, smart contract auditing thing is the lack of auditors and the time that it takes to audit something properly. So, we've had clients who have asked us to get a third party to audit our development work, and we've received quotes back to, tens of thousands of dollars, and we'll start the work in 4 months' time. And they go, don't worry, just go live, we'll work it out later, right? So we have to pull the pin on that and slow things down, and it comes back to resourcing. Why is it going to take 4 months to start the work? Why is it that we can't just have someone have a look at this as we go? Why can't we monitor smart contracts that hold money 24/7 live as they happen? So I'm sure the solutions are getting there. I'm sure that there are lots of people working. I know of a few that are, proof of concept stage and coming to the party, but they're not known. And if we don't know them, I look at Joe and everyone on the panel and stuff, and we go, geez, we're not sure how to go about this. How would our customers know? I mean, the education is still at the point of, well, Bitcoin went down, this is not trusted. Out there in the average punter and the small enterprises, that's still the thinking. Hey, Bill, stop talking about this. The price went down. Yesterday was all right. Today it's not. So I think we need to balance the education, the awareness, and have some successes that are really pumped up and spoken highly of. And there's lots of them out there, including in the DeFi world, including in the NFT world. There's lots of successes in places where this stuff has been done and done well. But I'm not sure we're spreading the story of blockchain and the value of it, and separating that from the crypto side of it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Joe, go ahead.
I think a really interesting point to that is also the emergence of soulbound tokens. So the purpose of soulbound tokens is that it gets away from that financial get-rich-quick scheme that everybody has the narrative around in crypto. And so that's what I've been trying to focus on, both in my personal development and in client work, is trying to get more non-financial tokens out there, such as soulbound tokens.
Yeah, interesting. I kind of want to throw an interesting question out there to that point, Bill. I mean, getting something to market relatively quickly is a common practice that a lot of early stage startups sort of go through. I wonder if there's any sort of, or I'm sure there are, but what are the main sort of security challenges relating to a DLT solution as opposed to a Web 2 based startup, and why shouldn't DLT solution based startups undertake the same approaches as Web 2 based startups?
I think your last statement is the most accurate. They should be following. Security is security. The principles, and that's why I said before when Ciaran was talking, we spent the last 25 years building all the principles and the frameworks and everything else. Now we're just extending it out to emerging tech, whether it's blockchain, AI, IoT devices, where the data is stored and so forth. The principles should still be the same. And that's where we try to bring our Web 2 experience and 23 years in business thinking and securing to our development and managed services. Because one of the things that blockchain and DApp applications have given us is we've got to store data on-chain and off-chain. So now all of a sudden we've got the on-chain data, smart contracts and all that stuff that needs to be managed. And we potentially have off-chain data that is connected to it that now needs to be managed. So we've actually got a higher level of security requirements, but the principles for security are exactly the same. Nothing's changed. We've just got to implement them and find people/systems to manage them.
And the beauty of Web3 particularly is that a lot of this is open source. Whatever is on chain, smart contract, they are open source. So I meet so many people that created a solution. And I'm like, oh, there are these 4 others that did the same thing. Did you actually read through their smart contract and see how they did it? And a lot of the time they didn't. They just started writing from day one without actually even learning how it is done. And if you read some code, you will find the problem straight away, because that's what we human do. We are good at finding faults of others. So it's the best way to learn that, okay, these are the problem with those smart contracts that I need to make sure that I solve when I write my smart contract. And people are not doing those basic things. That alone can improve the quality of system so much.
That's great. Okay, cool. We have just over 7 or just about 7 minutes to go. So I want to keep some time for this particular question or this topic, and it relates to trust. So Ciaran, you've mentioned trust earlier. Bill, you talked about sort of the regulators and what their involvement should be. So you sort of indicated that a certain level of trust goes to regulators. But I think the question I want to ask you guys is not who do we trust, but what do we trust, and how do we assign our trust accordingly in this new environment? And when I say what, I mean, do we trust people, systems, or tech systems? Who wants to take that one? Spicy takes as well, please, are encouraged.
I can go. Never trust the money, first and foremost. I don't know, like, of course, who to trust is the whole idea of blockchain is that system can provide that trust instead of a middleman and middle institute. So that's the obvious one. But what is required to do that is a process of creating those systems needs to be a process that everyone can trust in. And then we need to make sure that the system creation has followed that process so that system can be trusted enough. But yes, end goal is that the trust should be provided by system. So we do not need to rely on people and institute for that trust.
Sorry, at all, or or do we reduce the amount of trust that we place in people, or do you subscribe to the belief
there will be
that
still people, there will still be institute. We are not taking them out, and like everyone said here, not everything needs to be decentralized and DF, right? So wherever it can be provided, wherever it can be assisted, it will assist. Wherever it can be provided completely, it will provide, and wherever it does not need to be, let's not put it there.
Cool. Joe, I interrupted you. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to say that I agree. So the only person or fallible entity that you should really trust is yourself. So one of the common sayings in the blockchain space is regarding wallets, not your keys, not your coins. So if you need to put your trust in pretty much anything else and it's not really going to work, you need to make sure that you know what transactions you're executing, what you're doing on the chain, where your coins are at all times. So you really shouldn't put your trust in anyone. And like Prashant said, just trust the system. And if you don't know how the system works, that's where the education begins. You need to educate yourself so that you know how the system works, so that you can then use it to your advantage.
Joe's a true believer. That's good. but I couldn't agree more. I think if you think about it, I come from the side that says the software is the law, and everyone else can catch up behind us as we develop it and we invent things and we do things, and regulators will come, and they're doing it now and they're going to come through. But in terms of trust, you're not going to go to the regulator, you're not going to go to the institution, you're not going to go to the corporate, you're going to go down to the base level, which is your keys, right? And that's how I think we'll build trust, when we know the only person you trust is yourself.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Like, this is the real change we're seeing. But I do think it's tough for people right now. Like, I think the FGPI published some stats this year. For the first year, ransomware is no longer the top tactic that's generating revenue. It's investment scams. And a lot of them are crypto investment scams. And, while it's easy to tell people to, act responsibly, make good decisions, people do get attracted to these high, rewards, staking schemes and so on, and they take more risk on. And that's, as Joe said, education. How do we educate people rapidly to help them understand the technology and help them make educated decisions? And ultimately, it is common sense, and it seems easy, I think, for technologists in this space. But there's a whole raft of people out there that this is sort of black magic, and somehow we need to find a way to sort of spread that knowledge around this technology, and normalize it, I suppose. I think that's a big challenge for the industry. Bill talked about tools, about processes, just education and making it mainstream is the big challenge for all of us, I think.
I can't wait to the point where Web3 and wallets and things like that are at the same level of mass adoption as phones. So I visited my grandmother recently. I had never seen her use a phone in her life, and now she's like on TikTok and everything. So, like, if she's able to mass adopt TikTok, I feel like people could eventually get to the point where they can mass adopt wallets and Web3 and blockchain. And I just can't wait for that point.
That's a very important point, because what it needs to happen in Web3, it needs to be as simple as TikTok to be adopted, and we are
Exactly.
missing that. So the UX and simplification of that is a very, very important step in that.
And long way.
Long way, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, easy on
It's-
ramps. That's what we need.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even on TikTok, so props to your grandma for jumping on and keeping up with the world. But guys, I think that's about it. That's all the time we have. But for the people that joined us, I hope you took a lot out of this conversation today. I hope I definitely didn't overpromise here. These guys are really smart. They know what they're talking about. So if you want to get in touch with anyone on the panel, I think there's some links there that Amy Rose put in the chat. So feel free to say hi to any of us to carry on the conversation. I guess I'll close as well. And my view, as even though I'm a lawyer, I think the law is important and generally applies where there's a lack of a real solution. So a lot of the laws that we have at the moment, just sort of need to exist because we can't figure out a practical real world solution to solve it. That's my view. And, that's, one of the reasons why I love sort of the blockchain space is that, we are seeing some real world solutions to real world problems. And maybe we don't need to rely on the law so much, but, for the time being, I think we might. But anyway, I think that wraps us up. And yeah, I'll hand it over to Amy Rose.